Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the cEDH cast. My name is Ian, I'm one of your hosts, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Braden.
Hey, guys!
On this week's episode, we are going to be talking about the Philadelphia DDM Gaming event that happened the weekend of February 1st. We're going to be breaking down the entire tournament, our reactions from the event, and we have an interview with the winner of the entire event, Jared.
That's me. Hello.
Hey. And we're really happy to have you on and very excited to talk about the event. So, before we do anything, we got to do our patron shout out. Throwing it over to Braden.
Alright, so our random patron this week is Scotty from the Notion Thieves. Scotty has been a patron for just a few days, and he won the lucky raffle to be our random patron this week. So thank you, Scotty. It's really appreciated.
Thank you very much, Scotty. It's really amazing to have another content creator support our stuff. So, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much. Moving into our first topic, we're going to talk about our general impressions from the event. First off, Braden's going to talk about what he felt from an organizational standpoint.
Alright, so this was our very first cEDH event. And so there are a lot of lessons learned, a lot of problems, and a lot of fixes. One of the main problems we had was just structurally with pairing and getting the sheets out for who would be in what round and tracking who won what rounds. We had a person there in the beginning who ended up leaving after the first round, and so we had to have someone come in and pick it up, and that led to some problems that were thankfully fixed by the end of the fourth round. But in the future, we're going to have to need a new system, and luckily we have a lot of time to work on that. So I'm very excited to dig in, look through the data with Mike, who also ran the event with me, and figure out what we need to do. Additionally, we had a lot of rounds go to time. Some EDH games are just going to go 2 hours, but in the future, probably going to have to change the way extra turns work in some way so that we don't have a round go 45 minutes over time, because that just isn't a good thing. Otherwise, the food was amazing. The people were amazing. I had a great time chatting with people like Shaper and Scotty and Kixar and Ian and everyone, and Casually Competitive. They all came and it was amazing. Scotty and Shaper earned a ton of money for charity just by playing EDH all day. It was a great time.
Now, Braden, I hear that you had a revelation at this tournament, and what would that be?
Oh, cEDH isn't dead, and and the world isn't over.
So what I'm hearing is that the sky is not falling and that we are, in fact, okay.
The sky's still falling, but we're okay.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, one thing we're definitely going to talk about as we go through this breakdown of the event is that the deck diversity was a really wonderful surprise for a lot of us, and especially when we go and break down the top four, you're going to hear about some decks that you've probably either A, never heard of, or B, weren't expecting to hear in the top four of the event. The Fishhulk Menace was sort of looming overhead, but we had a really good tournament that was not dominated by it. So, we've heard from Braden. Let's hear from our tournament champion, Jared.
I really agree on the food and the people aspect of what Braden was saying. It was a really great venue at Nerd Merch and then the neighboring rec room. That was the larger venue space we used for the day. It was a very warm and friendly atmosphere. I've never talked to so many unfamiliar faces. Just being able to mingle throughout the day with these people was a really great thing, made the event worth it. It was something that I could have O2 dropped and still been really happy to be there for the day. And when you get into a tournament that's like 12 hours long, I think it was about that, player fatigue really can set in. That can be a big factor. And being able to get mushroom risotto halfway through the day, I think made so much of a difference throughout the day. So that was a really great thing. I would absolutely do another thing at that venue in the future. As far as the playing of the tournament, I thought all the rounds went smoothly. I mean, you mentioned some of the struggles from a TO perspective, but as a player, it felt like it was a well structured tournament. And I also hear that the casual event went well. That was in parallel at the other venue, and it was great to hear that there's an accessible tournament that had something for everyone in terms of power level and for a great cause.
Very much agreed. I think I have to agree about the venue specifically. We were on the second floor of a tavern, and that was just such a different environment than what the average Magic player is used to. When we go to a large event, it's either A, at an LGS where you know everybody. This wasn't that. Like, I traveled down from Massachusetts with a friend of mine, and it was such a different experience because this was an event where people were traveling to, but it still had a really cozy feeling environment. We were at the second floor of this tavern. There was amazing food. You could get drinks between rounds. I had the friend I came with was just, having a great time. I think he grabbed a drink between every single round, but he was still playing well because he made the top 16. But it was just such a different environment than what we are used to as Magic players. When you're at a Magic Fest, you don't have the chance to get like a veggie burger that is made by an actual chef.
You get a snack bar and you will be happy about it.
Yeah, exactly. You get the same pulled pork sandwich that they pull out of the fryer every day. And yeah, you don't get to grab a drink with people between rounds. You don't get to sit down at a bar and talk to people. And there were also games firing on the side of cEDH for people between rounds or people who had come just to jam games with people, not during the actual tournament. So,
yeah, I came in a group of 7 people, and I don't think any of us were bored for the day. Like, everyone was doing something.
That's really awesome to hear. I completely agree myself. And even when I did scrub out of the actual main event, I was able to go play with Scotty and Shaper, which was a really great opportunity. Actually, it was funny. Ian Dodo and I were the people who challenged them at the time, so it was kind of the content creator battle off. It was very funny.
Battle of the Ians.
Yes, there were 3 Ians at the table and 1 Scotty, and a battle of the ages.
Are we concerned about this new Ian meta?
I've gone on this rant to like 8 people. I do not run into other Ians a lot, but for some reason, not only are there a ton of Ians who just freaking play cEDH, but there are also so many content creators that are Ians. There's Ian Dodo, there's Shaper, there's Ian from the Mystic Remoras. Like, there's so many of us.
There must be some weird demographics thing that makes it so, like, if your parents are likely to name you Ian, you're likely to end up as someone who makes content for an extremely niche format.
Well, what I think it's been is that people are now starting to take notice of the strength of Ians. So people had the Ians already, and now it's just knowing how to use it effectively in this meta.
You're exactly right.
It's optimizing your Ians.
You are so right. First thing
pick up your Ians now before they spike in price.
One thing that I will say about the event that I noticed as a general impression sort of mirrored what I said at the last episode when referring to Magic Fest New Jersey. There was a huge diversity of decks. People who pilot their one deck and know how to pilot it well were smart enough to take that deck into this tournament. It obviously paid off for Jared, and we'll talk about that later. But there were people who took lists that were not Fishhulk, that were not the, quote, tier 1 meta, and they were really having at least a decent amount of success with it because they knew how to pilot their lists very well. And I think that's very interesting, and I think that's a great thing for our format. One thing I noticed about these games in general, there were murmurs of games that ended quickly. However, that was not the majority. In fact, most games, as Braden mentioned, a lot of games went to time because they were really good cEDH games where some people would attempt to take an advantage. Counter happens, removal happens. So another person would try to take an advantage and they get stopped. And everyone was stuck in these grindy games. But I don't know. That's the kind of cEDH I live for. I love a grindy game that ends with someone making a Hail Mary at the very last second when everyone's finally out of counter spells and, someone flips their library over and has to do a manual lab man win.
Yeah.
I think that's a great cEDH game.
Absolutely. And I noticed there was a lot of really interesting threat assessment throughout the day because a lot of people, read up on how to counter Hulk, but then you have all these new decks that may not be in someone's local meta because of the amount of diversity we had. So we have people kind of on the fly learning this new interaction of threat assessment throughout the game with these different decks, different combos.
Yeah, there were also decks that attacked the format in just a different angle, but were also highly interactive and grindy, which made it so that you had to actually interact with them in the long term, but in the short term, they could also interact with Flash in a meaningful way. Like, there was an Unesh deck, and the idea behind the Unesh deck is they play a bunch of Changelings, or 2 or 3 mana Sphinxes or whatever, and so they get to cast, Factor Fiction for 0 mana or 1 mana, and they can get a huge amount of value, and then they can draw their whole deck by making 40 copies of their commander. That deck's sick. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I wish I had a chance to watch that. That looked really exciting.
But if you didn't have any experience playing against that deck, which no one in the room could possibly really have had experience playing against the deck, you wouldn't really know how to attack it, and you wouldn't know what the win condition was. And I think a lot of times, this is like experience from playing medium green personally, if you have a threat that people aren't really used to evaluating, or you play that threat after like a counterspell battle, if you can like time it right, you can win the game without people really noticing that you've won the game.
Right.
And then
exactly.
you can pull ahead crazy quick. I saw the Tatyova deck do that multiple times.
I also saw that from the Heliod deck as well. We'll talk about that in a minute.
With the example of the Tatyova deck, like you have 2 of your 3 win conditions in play or like in the graveyard where they need to be, and you just need like a fetch land to win.
And so many of the win conditions, or like at least incredibly beneficial pieces, are things that normally are not a high threat level in most board states. So there's a lot of the process of my deck that flies under the radar.
Yeah, that came up. That was
Agreed.
extremely valuable, I think, which is just very interesting.
I also watched the gentleman who was playing Heliod and who made the top 4 with that deck. He just was able to play like an appropriate amount of stacks pieces throughout the game just to slow everyone a little down, and while he leveraged the entire table into a position where he would eventually take advantage and win with the Walking Ballista combo. But until then, he would just interact enough to not expend most of his resources, because when you're playing mono white, you really have to like find as many cards that can 3-for-1 the table, because you're down card advantage.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, you're not cantripping as much.
Right, and then eventually when everyone had just ground out and had tried to win 3 or 4 times, I just watched one game where he was just like, all right, Enlightened Tutor, Walking Ballista, GG's, and everyone was like, oh, like we didn't leave up mana because it was Heliod.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake.
Yeah, the Heliod deck always felt, because I've been looking at the list and whatnot, it always, for me, it felt like a deck that you're happy to see in your pod because it'll help hate on your other 2 opponents. So you're glad that the Heliod is there, and then there's a really nasty combo that comes out of it. And it's like, oh no, he's winning.
Yeah. Exactly. So speaking of these decks in the top 4, let's talk about the craziest top 4 I've ever heard of in cEDH. As I mentioned before, there was the Heliod deck. We had Una, Queen of the Fae, Tatyova.
That's me.
And Yisan. What a spicy top 4. I'm like, it makes me so happy seeing this.
There's so few colors.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. There's so few colors. It's pretty insane that this is our top 4, but in a great way. I watched everyone in this top 4, by the way, throughout the day. I happened to, well, I don't know, at tournaments like these, you hear rumblings of people playing decks, and you get to really see them go off. And the gentleman who is playing Yisan, I know that deck is like his baby, and I talked to him about it for many hours. The Heliod pilot is someone who plays a significant amount of mono white. He was the same gentleman who topped a tournament with Lynn Civvy a little while ago, which is buck wild. And the gentleman who was playing Una, I saw the entire deck was like foiled out, and he had foil miscut Una, and you could tell this was like their passion project. It was insane seeing people who were so either devoted to these decks or so specifically working on these decks, and their passion and their time and their energy paid off.
And confident, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, they chose this deck over a lot of other things. I mean, I can only speak for myself and my group, but like we all had access. We could have built at least 3 100% Fishhulk decks, but we all chose to play something that we were more comfortable with.
Now, how long have you been playing Tatyova? I'm curious.
Let's see, a bit under a month, I would say, 2-3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But I come from a perspective of I like playing lands. It's just my thing. I get a little endorphin rush whenever I make land drops.
I have so much sympathy with that. I'm the exact same way.
When I was back mid-power, my deck was Titania. I really enjoyed that kind of synergy. Whenever I can afford Legacy, I like to play the lands deck. And my favorite pet deck, I guess, is the Adbon Nano deck. Shoutouts to Shaper. So I really like playing that really high land count because I think it's kind of in a unique space in the overall format.
You guys are so weird. I hate lands so much. If I could play a deck with all artifact lands, I would.
Imagine playing more than 28 lands. This post brought to you by Armageddon Gang.
Yeah, literally. Yes, I'm 100% the person who's like, I would rather jam a Blood Moon and an Armageddon.
I mean,
Get
why
your
not
lands
both,
out of here. I don't need them.
Why not be on 30
Yeah,
lands
you're right.
and Armageddon?
Oh, stop it. Get this heresy away from me.
Splendid Reclamation, so good.
Oh my god. All right.
Oh,
Well,
and I also play Scape Shift in Modern. I forgot to mention that.
okay, so clearly you are one of the lands.
What's the archetype, the player archetype? Is there like a Timmy for like land? I don't know. 'Cause that's
For
me.
land drops? I don't
think
know.
Just enjoying making land drops is probably a bit of a Timmy thing. In a non-judgmental
I think
way.
so. You're like, oh man, look at all these mana. Look at it. I want it.
So, when you sat in the top 4, what were your initial impressions?
A little bit of disbelief. I wasn't planning to take the thing. The event sounded exciting enough that when I was looking at the event, I was like, well, there's a lot of stuff for me to do. I would like to test this newer deck rather than something I'm more familiar with, because the decks I played in the past, I was testing Curious Control, I was testing Tasigur, Rashmi, and Bloodpod. And it just felt like one of those events where I kind of wanted to jam some new spice. And when I saw the top 4, I mean, when I made the top 4, I was really impressed and surprised. And then when I heard who else was in top 4 with me, I'm like, oh boy, this has made everything worth it.
Yeah, one thing I think is really worth pointing out, and I think we touched upon it earlier without explicitly kind of saying it, is that every single deck in the top 4, when you look down at your pod and you see a Najeela player, a Fish Hulk player, and I don't know, something like Curiosity Control, you're never going to be like, Heliod, that's the target. Una, gotta take them out first of all, right? Yeah, that's never gonna be your impression.
It was ironic not being the underdog.
Very true. But even so, like, people see I mean, you mentioned in your primer at one point that people let Tatyova resolve because they're just like, whatever, he's gonna draw a card.
Right,
you know?
like it's
Right?
not very impactful to the board state. It's not directly threatening a win. It's kind of just, a medium-sized creature. It's not really threatening a lot of combat either.
It is a good mana drain
Exactly.
target.
Oh, it's a very good mana drain target.
Ooh.
That was the card
Yeah.
I was playing around when I could. That's the only scary one.
Definitely. Shout out to Elsha. I feel that. Another 5-mana commander that I play all the
Yep.
time. But these decks, it's very interesting seeing that every single deck up there is a deck that can capitalize on being ignored. And I think, obviously, the fact that all of you made top 4 and that you won makes complete sense given that light.
Right, and I think it kind of shows the state of a lot of the meta. I mean, despite being a diverse format for this event, when you have a lot of Hulk and anti-Hulk and a lot of people trying to shut off other players' options, Tatyova is one of a couple decks that can still gain value during these stalemates in the game.
I think the other
Right.
impressive thing we talk about a lot, we talk about it all the time on this podcast, where the worst decks in the format play Curse Totem to make them up there with the best decks, and the best decks play No Rod for free, basically. This deck plays No Rod and Curse Totem with almost no
It's so
no
good.
punishment because you just are so
Yeah.
lands heavy. So it's
Yeah,
very
that was a unique design space that I was kind of pushing for. There are definitely some decklist concessions that I made. For example, not running Retreat to Coral Helm combo and not running Mana Dorks. But yeah, it's a concession that paid off in a couple games. I have to reevaluate, but for that event, it seemed good.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting choice. And I think it's very powerful to play a deck that doesn't play either of those. It's very unique too.
I know personally, after seeing this list, I was like, oh, it does exist. I can brew in this space. I want it. The idea to play both of those pieces is so hot. It's so good.
It's probably like Ian and I's favorite cards are those two cards.
Yeah. Can you just talk about how the top 4 went? How that game went? How you were able to clinch victory out of the hands of your opponent?
Absolutely. Yeah, I already kind of got it refreshed in my mind because I did a little tournament report on it. And there's also a perspective of this match from the Heliod player. He also has a tournament report. It started with in turn order, it was Heliod, Una, Yissen, and me. So I'm going last, which is obviously not ideal. I enjoyed my opening hand. It was something along the lines of Exploration and Carpet of Flowers, Sylvan Library. I think it was 3 lands and a Force of Will. So I'm like, okay, we're probably forcible without another blue card to pitch was a bit not great, but I had a lot of early game. And then the Helia player played, I think, like 3 or 4 cards on turn one. Grafdigger's Cage, there was a Chromox in there. I know there was an early Codex Shredder, which actually hurts my main combo line. So there were a lot of relevant pieces coming out early, and then I know the Yisan player started off on Root Maze. So I'm going last in turn order with a tapped land on turn one. So my main concern is that, oh boy, this is too slow to contest anything. I was just trying to get off the ground for the first couple turns of the match. It took a while to stabilize, though. Eventually, I was able to stabilize with Wayward Swordtooth, but I remember there was a Sword of Fire and Ice. My life total was getting hit. I know I was like in like the mid-20s in life total or something like that. So it was scary. It was definitely a pretty threatening show by the Heliod player, not to mention the Yisan player. If he had a removal spell for the Grafdigger's Cage, a lot of things would have been unlocked there. I know my intuition got Narsets reversaled by the Una player. That was fun.
Ooh, spicy.
Yeah, I can't quite recall what his intuition pile was, but I remember I believe there was a Windfall in there. He may have been trying to answer some of the board state. I can't quite recall right now. But yeah, there was some counter magic being thrown at the Heliod. I know Heliod tried to resolve a is it Karn the Great? Yeah, Karn the Great Creator that, null rods everyone's artifacts. That was, yeah, a lot of threatening plays came out, and in the end, I was able to finish it by doing an intuition pile for. It was Cyclonic Rift, Ghostly Flicker, which is my main combo piece, and a blue fetch land, which, if you're not familiar with the deck, you play a copy of Mystic Sanctuary, which is fetchable by that, and that lets you start your combo with Tatyova. You play Mystic Sanctuary, you use your Tatyova trigger, so you draw a card after you put a card on top with Sanctuary. So I had a Ghostly Flicker. They gave me the land because, it seemed like the right move. But it actually ended up giving me Mystic Sanctuary. I was able to rebuy stuff and kind of go off from there.
That's so good. What a good, fake out for them. They're just like, yeah, I'll give you this fetch land, whatever.
Yeah, that's definitely, one of the advantages of playing this off-meta deck is that, no one has infinite hours in the day to study every deck. So there are people who, aren't aware of Mystic Sanctuary and the Ghostly Flicker combo that it entails. There are people, I'm not as knowledgeable as I could be about, the chain of events for the Yisan verses. I'm not as familiar as I could be. So I think when you're bringing something kind of out there, you can that is an advantage, even if the actual deck list may not be, on paper. If the deck list may not seem as strong, sometimes the human factor comes into play, and you can actually have a stronger showing of a deck that people know less.
Yeah, it's actually really funny you bring up the Yisan thing, because a friend of the show, Matt, who is in my local play group and is probably the person I play with the most of this format, he is on Yisan almost exclusively. So I know all of his lines, and I've been in pods with people, and I'm like, guys, why is no one respecting his line right now? Can we please? He's going to get this, and then he's going to win the game. Can we all focus? And everyone's like, I don't know what that means. What are you talking about?
It happens all the
yeah.
time against Yisan. When Matt was especially learning the deck, he'd have the win, but he just didn't know it. I'd be like, come on, Matt, you just go verse here, verse here, verse here, verse here, and we're dead. And then everyone would scoop, and Matt would be like, what?
It's true. He's gotten significantly better with the deck now.
He's very good with the deck now. This is almost a year ago.
Great. So that was an awesome breakdown of the top four. Thank you for that, Jared. Let's talk about Tatyova itself. We sort of got the general idea of why you wanted to play the deck. You said it was your spicy option, and as we mentioned, the slight advantages about people not knowing what the heck you're up to. Was there any other sort of examples like that from the rounds that you felt like you really leveraged your unique list to gain you the win, basically?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of it comes down to the threat assessment of knowing what cards are important to counter. Trade Routes is a very unique card to this deck specifically. It lets you churn just so much value. Once Trade Routes was in play in one of my earlier rounds, I actually had a game where every turn I was putting a Mystic Sanctuary in play and getting back a counterspell or a Pongify or even just a cantrip. Yeah.
Gross.
There were games where I had multiple Cyclonic Rifts. There's a lot of cards that seemed kind of out there but were really helpful. And then you have things such as Sapphire Medallion, which in most cases is this kind of harmless ramp spell. Like, the card's useful, but it's not insane. But it turns out that a cost reducer is actually what enables the Ghostly Flicker lines to function. So it gives me that early and mid game value, but it also enables the main plan A of the deck.
Yeah, I never would have known that.
Yeah. So when you Ghostly Flicker, it costs 3 normally. You blink 2 things, but if you break even on mana, you tap 2 lands and get 2 untapped lands back. So it lets you advance from that point, basically.
That's pretty crazy. Anything else in that vein?
There's a Time Warp line that also can use trade routes or other bounce effects. That's pretty straightforward. You get a Time Warp on top every turn, and you take another turn. And let's see. I'm just looking for some spice really quick. Oh yeah, Storm Cauldron was an all-star.
Ooh.
I only had an opportunity to play it one time through the day, but when I did, it was just we entered garbage time for a little bit, because then you're at the point if there's any kind of big response happening at any point in the game, suddenly we're all kind of limited to 2 lands a turn. Everyone's kind of in that same kind of struggle.
Doing nothing.
It's similar to like a Winter Orb in a lot of how the game plays out from there, except when I have additional land drops, I can somewhat like break parity in a very unique way.
Very nice. Let's can we talk about Energy Flux for a minute, because that card is spicy as hell.
Yeah. So that was actually suggested by someone in a Simic Discord. I don't remember which one specifically right now, but I'll give a shout out to all 3 just to be sure. Smash Adams 83, Cursed Swamp, and MVP 1221. It was one of them that suggested the Energy Flux, and it had a lot of usefulness for a game or two. It tagged a couple relevant pieces. It slowed some fast mana down. I don't think so. I like this card, and it's something that I'm going to keep in my back burner. But for right now, I don't think the meta really benefits it as much as it could right now. So that's probably a card I'm going to cut going into the future. But if we see a resurgence of Mana Rocks, Dramatic Scepter decks, I'll probably slot it back in.
For those at home, I'm going to read this card. It is 2 in a blue for an enchantment, and it says, all artifacts have, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this artifact unless you pay 2. So it's like a double Kataki.
I was about to say, that's the card you compare it to, is Kataki. If Kataki is powerful in the meta, then I believe that this card is a natural progression from that.
That's awesome.
Being an enchantment is a nice space as well. It's harder to remove.
Mm-hmm. So you said your intuition piles are basically...
So this deck doesn't play intuition as well as some other decks, such as like Kess Storm, where you can flashback more readily. So intuition isn't the best card in this deck, but we can't play Demonic Tutor, so it works pretty well.
Yeah,
it's still a good card. You see it like, comparatively speaking, it's like not the best tutor, but in this deck, it's one of your best options. In a lot of cases, you're going to play this after you already have one of your combo pieces available in some way, shape, or form.
But it gets the B of the A plus B combo, basically.
But it's also worth mentioning that you can get two Crucible effects and a Noxious Survival. You can kind of jam some of that mid-game value out of your intuition as well in this deck. You don't have to go for the win off of it. A lot of people like to be really conservative with their tutors, but I would say mine can be more on the aggressive side comparatively.
And I feel like with this type of deck, you can be a little more liberal about jamming value, because, as we talked about earlier, you're not going to be the deck that they are aggressively countering.
Right. Everyone's worried about being out of gas for the combo deck, myself included.
Yes.
So, I definitely tend to be more conservative with my spells. So I think this deck complements a lot of my playstyle, where I can kind of shape my hand, and there were a lot of pieces throughout the day and in playtesting where someone would play a strong hate piece, someone would play a Blood Moon, and I would just let it resolve, because I can still execute my mid-game plan without really much setback. So it's definitely... there's a lot of the playstyle that isn't really shown by the deck list that I think made it successful for me.
Very cool. One card I was curious about was Memory's Journey. What's that one doing for you?
So that kind of there is a little bit of a safety valve. When you're ghostly flickering, you may stack too many draw triggers, and with infinite mana, it lets you it lets you resolve all those draw triggers. So it's a safety valve, and it has a corner case of being able to save your Ghostly Flicker if they go to exile it. So it's a nice little piece in there. I don't know. That was kind of something that I may have been building the deck a little bit too safe. I don't know if it's worth a slot right now. I think it's more at home in other decks. But again, it's like this was a big tournament, but in the end, it is still. I would still say it's a test run. I would still say the overall deck list is in beta. Trickbind did so much work. Oh man, please play that.
That was
card.
one of the best cards of the weekend, I think. Was Trickbind.
Yeah.
I got punked pretty hard by a Trickbind because I had an Autumn's Veil had already resolved, and I was like, wait, it doesn't stop this.
Yeah, I was watching.
Oh,
I was
no.
watching that game, and I was like, he's about to just walk right into that Trickbind.
So I had actually seen the same player use the Trickbind earlier that day, and everyone else was like tapped out, and I was like, what are the odds this dude has another Trickbind at the perfect moment? And I did go for it. So, but I had Trickbind in mind, but I still was like, there's no way I can't go for this right now. And got punked. Got punked pretty hard.
It was rough.
I only countered one Hulk trigger through the whole day, and it was still so much worth the include in the deck.
Yeah, I think it's a card that is kind of necessary in the current meta. One, it can really hose a person who is on Flash, but also there's a lot of like really interesting niche cases. Like it can counter every Smothering Tide trigger.
Right. Yeah.
After like a giant wheel, like stuff like that. It has very interesting interactions. Do you want to talk about any of the land includes while we are talking about spicy parts of your deck?
Yeah. So a lot of these are kind of natural progressions for the deck to be included in it. Like, I mean, you want a lot of blue sources. Running Mystic Sanctuary means you have to have a reasonably high island count. I think I'm running 7 plus a breeding pool plus a trop island, so I have 9 islands in the deck plus all the blue fetches. Yeah, a lot of I believe I'm running a Prismatic Vista in here as well. Yeah, so I'm just trying to play those fetch lands where I get to double draw trigger off Tatyova. That's a really nice thing that you get to do. Boro Palace in the Clouds. That's basically trade routes. It's just a land you can replay, get extra value out of it. Forbidden Orchard is necessary for the Reality Shift loop, where you can exile their libraries if they don't have a creature in play. And Field of the Dead, I want to like...
Oh, I didn't even see that. Oh, so
yeah,
spicy.
I'm running the snow and regular basic land split to accommodate it. There are enough unique sources, and there was one game, actually my top 16 match was one off the back of Field of the Dead, swinging for like 20 a turn with zombies. I'm still trying to figure out where I want that to be. I don't know if Field of the Dead is the best call, but I really like the card. I mean...
It's totally worth the inclusion, to be honest. I wouldn't really even consider cutting it. It seems like a good plain C or D.
Yeah, there are a lot of lands that I almost consider to be a spell slot instead of a land slot, and Field of the Dead would absolutely be one that I would consider, more along the lines of an enchantment in terms of what it offers.
Yeah. I see Alchemist Refuge in here. That's also pretty hot.
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of like colorless lands, there aren't many, so it was pretty easy to slot some kind of tech options. I don't think I ever used it. I barely drew it, but it definitely would have come in handy in a couple games, because this deck, you can see it runs a reasonable number of permanents, like a couple artifacts and enchantments. I would say more than a lot of other decks do. So having Refuge to get some of those cheap spells in play on end step is nice. Being able to hold up a lot of your counter magic, which the deck plays a lot of.
Now, is the Strip Mine for Ghostly Flicker loop?
Nope.
Or, sorry, not the Strip Mine, the Sunscorched.
Oh, yeah, the
Desert.
Sunscorched Desert, thank you. Yeah, that is one of the ways that you win the game off of Ghostly Flicker loop. You can repeatedly blink it, get it back. So you blink the Desert and Mystic Sanctuary. The Mystic Sanctuary combined with Tatyova gives you the Flicker back. And then every time you do the loop, you're hitting them for one with Sunscorched Desert.
That's so cool.
Yep.
How often were you actually able to use Beseju throughout the tournament?
Let's see. So the game I won with Time Warp, I had it in play. That allowed me to
Very nice.
pretty safely execute that. Notably, you can't do it with the Ghostly Flicker loop because it comes into play tapped. It only protects your first iteration. But in terms of protecting your counter magic, being able to protect your Cyclonic Rift, I mean, this deck has a reasonable number of spells. 26 instants and 5 sorceries, but there were enough targets in the deck that I wanted to be uncounterable that it seemed worthwhile
Sure,
to run
yeah.
it.
Did you ever consider Amulet of Vigor?
I did consider Amulet of Vigor, yeah. If I did that, I would also run the Simic Growth Chamber, the Karoo land.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are more combos that open up with Amulet of Vigor, and if you're doing it lets Boseiju come into play on tap. That's pretty relevant. There definitely are uses for the card. I think I don't know. It's something that I have to test. It's something that definitely has an upside. I just have to consider if it's enough of an upside, because there are other decklist changes that would have to be made for that.
That's fair. Awesome. One thing I was going to say, or when we were talking about Boseiju, I had a very interesting thing happen this weekend when I was playing against a Urza player who had thrown down a Trinisphere, and a bunch of my spells that normally would not be able to have been protected by Boseiju, like my Chain of Vapor and my traditional counter
that's
spell,
right.
I was able to have them protected with Boseiju because of Trinisphere's wording.
That's super
That's
cute.
wonderful.
That's so cool.
It was very funny. The Urza opponent was like, I don't know if I'm giving you this. And I was like, you might be, dude. I don't know.
Now that you mentioned Trinisphere, that reminded me of another noteworthy thing I played for the day, Oko.
What'd you think of Oko?
Oko did a lot more than I was expecting. I mean, I figured that the grindy nature of the deck would favor something like more planeswalkers, and Oko definitely pulled his weight for the day. In most cases, he functioned as another copy of Gilded Drake, and in terms of what he does. The transmute effects were really strong, and I would notice that I would have an Oko in play, and at that point, no one was really casting their commanders. So he definitely functions as a really good proactive tool, if nothing else. And yeah, a lot of the value that he generates is definitely very unique to the card. And you'll see a lot of people trying to take him out with combat if they don't have a Pyroblast. But again, the same problem that he brings up in Standard is that he has such a high loyalty right off the bat. It usually takes 2, maybe 3 rounds of combat, and that's while he is activating his abilities, making 3/3 blockers, converting problem permanents. And worth noting that you can target artifacts. You can target things such as Trinisphere. You can target things such as Null Rod if it's ever relevant. Yeah, a lot of versatile use from Oko for the day. I would definitely keep him in the deck.
Very good to hear. I've been thinking about that card in a lot of lists for a bit now.
Notably, which I find great, you can actually use Ancient Tomb as part of the loop, because you're able to pay the 2 life each time, because Tatyova gives you 1 life on each landfall trigger. So yeah,
That's
you are able to use Ancient Tomb.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I thought of that, but I was like, the 2 damage. That's so good.
Right. Because a main concern that I had early on was the fragility of Ghostly Flicker loops, and what happens if your cost reducer, it's not difficult to remove a Baral or a Sapphire Medallion or a Lotus Cobra. So having these secret cost reducers in the deck, it definitely makes the combo a little bit more viable.
Yeah, I'm all about that.
Wow, this deck is awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of really hot spice in here, and I like a lot of people when they build decks that aren't exactly meta, they tend to skimp on win cons, but it sounds like there's just an abundance for you in this deck.
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, Ghostly Flicker is a very clear forefront plan A of the deck.
Yeah.
That's something I was noticing, that the other win cons that I had prepared for, they really weren't being used, but it was good that they were there. I felt that if the one combo fizzled, I probably would have been in a position to convert to a different option. So I mean, having a combo, a loop win, and then even just the grindy, Field of the Dead combat win is nice to have at your disposal.
Very cool, man. I love hearing about this deck. So it's been a great time talking about this tournament, and we're super excited to announce that there is a sequel coming up this May.
Yeah, so on May 2nd, we're going to have
Round 2.
So it's just going to be another event, but this time it's going to be a 1K plus. That means we're giving away over $1,000 in prizes. If you come in first in this event, you're going to get an Invention Mana Crypt. Additionally, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th are getting Invention Chrome Boxes. And then if you make the top 16, but you don't make the top 4, so 5th through 16th, you're going to get $40 store credit. So you'll be able to use that at the Bearded Dragon, which is actually one of the better stores on the East Coast, which is pretty cool.
I'll be there to defend my title. bring your Heliod's, bring your Yissens, bring your Ians.
You gotta slam that Ian tech for this tournament. I think it's really gonna optimize
Time to
your
change
play.
my legal name to Ian.
We can't be the Ian cast. We can't.
Instant boost in win rate.
Braden, the only thing identifying me on the internet is that I am Ian from the cEDH cast. You can't take that from
No,
me.
that isn't even your identifier. You're also Ian Dodo.
Imagine
no,
pairings
I'm not.
being called like at seat 1 we have Ian, at seat 2 Ian.
Yeah, well, it would make announcing easy because they could be like, well, it seems Ian's pulling ahead this tournament.
There's an Ian in the lead. The Lab Maniacs gave us a shout out, and he's like, yeah, that's that podcast with Braden and Ian Dodo. And I was like,
I was like, well, not him, but that's okay. I actually was joking with Ian Dodo about that when I met him in Philly.
he's really nice.
Yeah, super cool guy. Really good to meet him.
So, yeah, I'm really excited for that event. I can't say who's going to be there, but we're currently harassing a whole bunch of content creators. We know the 99 will be there. We know Casually Competitive will be there. I'm knocking on the door of Playing with Power every day, trying to see if they'll come. So if you're a fan of Playing with Power, please harass them on the behalf of me.
So that is the Bearded Dragon is the location, and that's in New Jersey,
it's
correct?
like an hour outside New York. We're trying to hit 100 people. That's our cap, and we'd really like to hit the cap.
And you know what? We want to smash that cap, too.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
There's already like 26 tickets sold, so it's already like 20% sold this far in advance. So definitely pick up your tickets as soon as possible. Although I understand EDH players and Magic players are very, very good at procrastinating.
Well, I have to say, Jared, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really great to kind of have this platform to talk about event and the kind of the uniqueness of where the meta can be.
Definitely. I think this whole tournament has been a really awesome perspective shift from the doom and gloom that a lot of the community has been in for a while. And I think this is a really great opportunity to celebrate the positives of our format.
And I think the event really kind of goes with that positive atmosphere. I think that there's something about this tournament series that I think is going to really push that positive conversation going forward.
Completely agreed. Braden, before we head out for the day, do you want to hit us up with our social media?
We're
whereabouts?
on Instagram at the cEDH Cast. We're on Twitter at the cEDH Cast. We're on SoundCloud at cEDH Spacecast. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Play, I think, or Google Podcasts. We're on Stitcher now. I don't know what that is, but we're on it. Oh, we're on Patreon. Yeah, give us money.
Wow, the Patreon shout-out gets better and better each week.
I am ordering my microphone that we got from Patreon money very soon. We're going to need to set new Patreon goals. Ian and I will be talking about that probably very soon.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I have some pretty spicy ideas that Braden's probably gonna hate, and I hope you will all enjoy. So we're gonna have some fun with these new Patreon goals. But really, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Braden was finally able to buy a microphone that we both are excited about in a professional standard. We use the money to allow us to be able to put our stuff on SoundCloud, which is our main hosting site. We are going to pay back the graphic artist who made back our logo, and a lot more to come. So I'm very excited, and thank you all for your support so far. So from all of us here at the cEDH Cast, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.